Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. The Draconian fleet came to conquer Earth. Then something forced them to stay. The morning sky over New York turned from blue to black in less than 5 minutes. It wasn't a storm, it wasn't clouds, it was ships, hundreds of them, each the size of a small city, blocking out the sun with their dark metal hulls. Jack Roberts stood on the roof of his apartment building, coffee still warm in his hand, mouth open in shock. Around him, others had come up to see what was happening. Some were taking pictures, some were crying, and some just stared. "Are those spaceships?" asked an old man next to Jack. Jack couldn't answer, his eyes were fixed on the largest ship which hung directly above the city center. It was shaped like a giant arrowhead, with edges that seemed to glow with a faint green light. Smaller ships moved around it like bees around a hive. The same thing was happening all over the world, in London, Tokyo, Moscow, Delhi, and every major city, where people looked up to see their skies filled with these strange vessels. News channels were going crazy, social media was exploding with videos and theories, and government phones were ringing non-stop. In the White House Situation Room, President Wilson sat at the head of a long table surrounded by military generals and advisors. The room was tense, with screens showing live feeds from around the world. "Mr. President, we've tried all communication channels, radio, television, internet broadcasts. They're not responding," said General Harris, his face tight with worry. "What about our satellites? What are they telling us?" asked the president. A woman in a NASA uniform stepped forward. "Sir, these ships appeared out of nowhere. 1 minute, our scans showed normal space, the next, they were here. They're using technology we can't even begin to understand." The door to the room burst open, and a young aide rushed in. "Mr. President, we just received a message, it's being broadcast on all channels worldwide." The screens in the room flickered and then showed the image of what could only be described as a reptile standing upright. Its skin was dark green with patches of blue scales, its eyes were large and yellow with vertical slits, and it wore some kind of armor that seemed to move with its body. "People of Earth," it spoke in a deep, rough voice, "I am Captain Drake of the Draconian Empire. Your planet is now under our control. Surrender your resources and accept our rule, or we will destroy your cities one by one. You have 24 Earth hours to respond." The message ended, and the room fell silent. "Get me James Walker," said the president finally. "If anyone can make sense of this, it's him." James Walker was in the middle of a lecture when his phone buzzed. He ignored it, then it buzzed again and again. Finally, he pulled it from his pocket and saw 15 missed calls from a number he hadn't seen in years. "I'm sorry," he told his students, "class is dismissed early today." As the students filed out, many of them checking their phones and gasping, James returned the call. "Walker," he answered. "James, it's me," said a voice he recognized immediately as General Patel, his old commanding officer. "We need you at the Pentagon now." "I'm not military anymore, sir, I teach history now." "It's not just military, it's everything. Turn on your TV." James walked to his office and switched on the small television he kept there. The image of the reptilian creature filled the screen, repeating its message. "I'll be there in an hour," James said, hanging up. The Pentagon was in chaos. When James arrived, he was immediately escorted to a secure room deep within the building. Inside, he found General Patel along with scientists, military officers, and intelligence analysts. "Walker, good to see you," said Patel, shaking his hand firmly. "We need your strategic mind right now." "What do we know about them?" James asked, getting straight to the point. A scientist stepped forward. "They call themselves Draconians. Based on their message and the positioning of their ships, we believe they're a military-focused species. Their technology is far beyond ours, our missiles can't even reach their ships, they're destroyed mid-flight by some kind of energy field." James nodded, taking it all in. "Have they attacked yet?" No, said Patel, just the message. But they've positioned ships over every major city on Earth. They could wipe us out in minutes if they wanted to. James walked to a large screen showing the positions of the alien ships worldwide. Interesting, he said, studying the pattern. They're all maintaining high-altitude positions, none of them have attempted to land. Probably tactical, said a military officer. Control the skies, control the battle. James shook his head. Maybe, or maybe there's another reason they're staying up there. He pointed to data readings on another screen. Look at their ship movements, they're maintaining a minimum altitude of about 15,000 feet. Not a single ship has gone lower, even for reconnaissance. What are you thinking? Walker asked Patel. I'm thinking we need more information, and I'm thinking that if they wanted us all dead, we'd be dead already. They want something else. James turned to face the room. I'm thinking that despite their scary appearance and big threats, they might have a weakness. We just need to find it. Just then, alarms began to sound. A technician at a computer called out, "Sir, one of the smaller ships is breaking formation, it's moving towards the Pentagon." Everyone in the room froze. James moved to the window and looked up at the sky through the glass. He could see a dark shape descending, still high above, but definitely heading their way. They must have detected our meeting, someone said. They know we're planning something, James observed, watching the ship carefully, noting how it seemed to pause at regular intervals as it descended. No, he said quietly, they're testing something. Look at how they're moving, careful, measured drops in altitude. The ship stopped its descent and hovered, still thousands of feet above the ground. They're afraid of something down here, James said, his mind racing with possibilities. And I think I might know what it is. Suddenly, the ship fired a beam of bright green energy. It struck a nearby empty field, leaving a smoking crater in the ground. That was a warning, James said. They're telling us they can hit us, but they're choosing not to. Not yet. He turned to General Patel. I need a team, scientists, military, the best we've got, and I need data on these ships, every reading, every movement pattern. What's your plan? Walker asked Patel. James looked back up at the hovering Draconian ship to find out why the most advanced alien fleet we've ever seen is afraid to land on our primitive planet. The countdown to humanity's response had begun. The world's militaries responded exactly as James Walker expected. With force and failure, fighter jets from the United States, China, Russia, and other nations screamed into the sky as weapons and hot missiles launched from ground stations and submarines. For a brief moment, the skies lit up with explosions as humanity threw everything they had at the invaders. It made no difference. The Draconian ship's green shields flickered slightly when struck, but none fell, none even moved from their positions. It was like throwing pebbles at a tank. From his temporary office at the Pentagon, James watched the attacks on multiple screens. He wasn't surprised when Captain Drake's face appeared on global broadcasts again. Your weapons are primitive and useless, the reptilian commander said, his yellow eyes narrowing. For this foolish attack, we will demonstrate our power. One of the smaller Draconian ships moved over a military base in the desert. A beam of intense green light shot downward. When it ended, nothing remained of the base but a smoking crater. The next target will be populated areas, Drake warned. Surrender now. General Patel entered James's office, his face grim. We've lost bases in Nevada, Siberia, and the South China Sea, all wiped out in seconds. James nodded, but his eyes never left the screens showing the positions of the Draconian fleet. Notice something? He asked, pointing to the data. What am I looking for? Patel asked one of the team members. Even during the attacks, not a single Draconian ship descended below 15,000 feet, James said. Even when it would have made tactical sense to come lower for better accuracy. Maybe their weapons work best from that height, Patel suggested. Or maybe they can't come lower, James replied. I need to test this theory, and I need someone who understands atmospheric science. Dr. Anna Miller was not what James expected. The leading atmospheric physicist was a small woman with wild red hair and thick glasses who spoke faster than most people could think. "So you think these lizard aliens can't handle our atmospheric pressure?" she asked rapidly, typing equations into her computer. "Interesting hypothesis. What made you think of it?" "Their behavior," James said. "They maintain strict altitude minimums. When they do descend, they do it in careful stages, as if they're testing the waters, and they never, ever land." Anna nodded. "If they evolved on a world with lower gravity and a thinner atmosphere, Earth would be like deep-sea pressure to them. It could crush their bodies or damage their technology." Colonel Thomas Reed, the military liaison assigned to their team, looked skeptical. "Even if you're right, how does this help us? They can still blow us to bits from up there." James said, "If we know their weakness, we can force them into it." Reed raised an eyebrow. "You want to pull spaceships down from the sky?" "Exactly," James said. "Dr. Miller, is there any way to create localized atmospheric pressure changes, something that could affect objects at high altitude?" Anna's eyes lit up. "Actually, yes. I've been working on weather modification systems that use ionized particles to create pressure differentials. It was meant for drought relief, but theoretically," she trailed off, already scribbling calculations. "How soon can we test it?" James asked. Anna looked up at him, a small smile forming. "Give me 48 hours and a good engineer." The next day, more Draconian attacks came. 3 cities received warning shots, beams that destroyed empty parks and sections of highway. The message was clear: next time, they wouldn't miss. World leaders were panicking, some were already talking surrender, but President Wilson gave James and his team the resources they needed. Despite pressure to give in to the Draconians' demands, this better work. "Walker," the president said over a secure video call, "I'm holding off a global surrender based on your theory." "I understand, sir," James replied. "We'll be ready to test tomorrow." The test site was a remote area of the Mauve Desert. Anna's team had worked through the night to build what she called an atmospheric disruptor, a device that looked like a satellite dish connected to a series of large metal tanks. "It creates a column of rapidly shifting pressure," she explained to James and Colonel Reed. "If it works, it should create a sort of vacuum pole that will force anything above it to descend." "And if it doesn't work?" Reed asked. "Then we're no worse off than before," James replied. They positioned themselves on a ridge, a safe distance away. Anna activated the device remotely. At first, nothing seemed to happen, then James noticed rippling in the air above the disruptor, like heat waves but more pronounced. "It's working!" Anna exclaimed, checking readings on her tablet. "The pressure difference is building. Now we wait and see if our friends notice." They didn't have to wait long. A small Draconian scout ship that had been patrolling the area suddenly jerked in the sky, as if caught in a current. It tried to move away but seemed to struggle against an invisible force. "It's fighting the pressure differential," Anna said excitedly. The ship's engines glowed brighter as it tried to escape, but the pull was too strong. Slowly, it began to descend. "It's working," James whispered, watching as the ship was drawn closer to Earth than any Draconian vessel had come before. At about 5,000 feet, the ship began to shudder violently. Parts of its hull started to buckle inward, as if being crushed by giant hands. Strange sounds reached them, high-pitched wailing mixed with the groan of metal under stress. "Their hull can't handle the pressure," Reed said, watching through binoculars. The ship managed to fire its engines in a desperate burst, breaking free of the disruptor's pull and shooting back to a higher altitude, but the damage was done. It listed to one side, clearly wounded. "We've proven the theory," James said. "They can't survive in Earth's lower atmosphere." Anna was already making notes. "We'll need more disruptors, bigger ones, and we'll need to place them strategically around the world." James nodded. And we need to capture one of their ships intact. We need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. As if in response to their success, alarms sounded from their equipment. On the radar, they could see multiple Draconian ships converging on their location. They know, Reed said grimly, already calling for evacuation transport as they rushed to pack up the equipment. James took one last look at the sky. The Draconian ships were keeping their distance but were clearly scanning the area. We found their weakness, he said. Now we need to exploit it before they figure out how to counter it. The race against time had begun. With the fate of Earth hanging in the balance, for the first time since the invasion started, humanity had hope. The helicopter barely escaped as James, Anna, and Colonel Reed flew away from the test site. 3 Draconian ships circled the area where they had placed the atmospheric disruptor. A beam of green light shot down, and the disruptor was gone. "They're scared," James said, watching through the helicopter window. "They wouldn't have destroyed it so quickly if they weren't." Back at the underground facility assigned to their team, Anna immediately began working on an improved version of the disruptor. The first one was too small, she explained to the growing team of scientists and military personnel, but it proved the concept works. "We need bigger ones, and we need many of them." James stood before a world map, pointing out potential locations. "We'll need to create a network of these devices around major population centers. If we can force their ships into lower altitudes, Earth's atmosphere itself becomes our weapon." Colonel Reed pointed to a notification on his tablet. "We have a new problem. The Draconians have started destroying weather and research stations worldwide. They're targeting anything that might be used to study or affect the atmosphere." "They're catching on," James said. "We need to move faster." A young technician rushed in. "Sir, we've got something." Satellite imagery had caught the damaged scout ship landing on a remote mountain peak in the Himalayas. James looked up sharply. "Landing? They actually touched down?" "Yes, sir, and it looks like they're making repairs." "That's our chance," James said. "We need to capture that ship." The operation was risky. A team of Special Forces soldiers, led by Colonel Reed, approached the damaged Draconian ship under cover of night. The ship sat on one of the highest peaks in the Himalayas, where the air was thin, closer to the conditions the Draconians seemed comfortable with. From his command post several miles away, James watched through night vision cameras mounted on the soldiers' helmets. The ship was smaller than the main Draconian vessels, about the size of a passenger jet, and its hull still showed damage from the pressure differential it had experienced. 2 Draconian crew members worked outside the ship wearing what looked like special suits with built-in support structures. "They need exoskeletons to function in our gravity," Anna noted, watching the feed. "Look how slowly they move, even in the thin air up there." Reed's voice came through the radio, "Team in position, waiting for go order. Remember, we need at least one of them alive." "James," he said, "and try not to damage the ship further." "Understood." Moving in, the Special Forces team used tranquilizer darts specially designed by Anna to work on reptilian biology. The 2 Draconians outside the ship collapsed before they could sound an alarm. The team moved quickly to secure the area. The ship entry team was moving in. Reed reported from inside the ship that they encountered 3 more Draconians. 2 were subdued with tranquilizers, but 1 managed to activate an alarm before being captured. "We've got company," Reed shouted over the radio. 2 larger ships are approaching. We need immediate extraction." "What about the Draconian ship?" James asked. "No time to fly it out," Reed replied. "We've downloaded what we could from their computers, and we're bringing one of the crew. That's all we can manage." Helicopters rushed in for extraction as the Special Forces team retreated with their Draconian prisoner. The captured Draconian was kept in a special chamber with reduced air pressure and gravity simulation. It was smaller than Captain Drake, with lighter-colored scales and 4 fingers on each hand instead of 3. After 2 days, it finally began to communicate through a translation device the scientists had developed based on the Draconians' broadcast signals. "You will all die, were its first words. The Empire does not tolerate resistance. James sat across from the creature, separated by a transparent barrier. "What is your name?" he asked. The Draconian made a hissing sound. "Krell, Navigator, 3rd rank." "Why did your people come to Earth?" James pressed. "Krell, resources, minerals, your world is rich with elements. We need them." James nodded. "And why don't your ships ever land? Why stay in the sky?" Krell's vertical pupils narrowed. "You know why, your world is heavy. The air crushes you." "Evolved on a world with lower gravity and a thinner atmosphere," Anna added, joining the conversation. "Yes, our home world orbits a gas giant. Your planet would kill us," James leaned forward. "Then how did you plan to take our resources if you can't even land?" "Extraction ships pull resources from orbit, no need to touch the ground." The information from the scout ship's computers confirmed Krell's statements. The Draconians' bodies were adapted to approximately 0.6 Earth gravity and 70% of Earth's atmospheric pressure. Their ships contained life support systems that maintained these conditions. The data also revealed something crucial: the Draconian shields, while effective against weapons, required enormous energy to maintain against natural forces like gravity and atmospheric pressure. "That's why the scout ship was damaged," Anna explained during an emergency briefing with the president. "When our disruptor forced it lower, its shields couldn't compensate for the increased pressure. The ships can't maintain their shields indefinitely against Earth's natural conditions." "So what's the plan?" the president asked. James unfolded a map on the table. "Operation Groundfall. We build atmospheric disruptors at these locations worldwide, but instead of just one or two, we create dozens, hundreds, if possible. We force their entire fleet into lower altitudes, where Earth's pressure begins to crush their ships." "Can we build enough disruptors in time?" the president asked. Anna nodded. "We've simplified the design. Factories worldwide can produce the components, we just need to coordinate the global effort." "And what about Captain Drake?" "He'll figure out what we're doing," James tapped the map. "That's why timing is critical. We activate all disruptors simultaneously. Even if they destroy some, they can't get them all before their ships start feeling the effects." The president stood up. "Do it. I'll coordinate with other world leaders." As dawn broke around the world, 3 days later, trucks and helicopters delivered the final components to disruptor sites. Teams worked frantically to complete the installations. In the Draconian command ship, Captain Drake received reports of unusual activity worldwide. "The humans are building something," his second-in-command reported, similar to the device that damaged the scout ship. Drake's scaled face hardened. "Destroy them all now." Soon, Draconian ships began moving to attack positions, but they were too late. At precisely 12 o'clock Universal Time Coordinated, thousands of atmospheric disruptors activated simultaneously around the world. The sky seemed to ripple and distort as massive pressure differentials formed like invisible hands, pulling the Draconian fleet downward from the command center. James watched on as ship after ship began to struggle against the pull. "It's working," Anna said, watching the altitude readings drop. "They're coming down." As the ships descended, their hulls began to creak and groan. Some of the smaller vessels already showed signs of buckling. "Now we see if Earth itself can defeat them," James said quietly. For the first hour, Operation Groundfall worked perfectly. Across the world, thousands of atmospheric disruptors pulled the Draconian ships downward. On screens in the command center, James and his team watched as altitude readings dropped steadily, 12,000 feet, 11,000 feet, 10,000 feet, while Anna called out, monitoring the main fleet over North America. "Hold, stress increasing on all vessels." Several of the smaller Draconian ships are already showing serious damage, their sleek metal skins are wrinkled and bent under Earth's crushing atmosphere. 3 scout ships have completely lost power and are falling freely toward the ocean. "It's working better than we expected," Colonel Reed said, watching a large tactical display. At this rate, the entire fleet will be crippled within the hour. But Captain Drake was not defeated so easily. On the main Draconian command ship, Drake slammed his scaled fist against the control panel. Engage emergency protocols, all ships, release atmospheric scrubbers from the underside of every Draconian vessel. Small devices dropped as they fell, devices that activated, releasing a strange blue gas that spread quickly through the air inside the command center. Alarms began to sound. "What's happening?" James demanded. A scientist monitoring atmospheric readings looked up with concern. "The air composition is changing around their ships, they're neutralizing our pressure differentials." On the screens, they could see the Draconian ship stabilizing, no longer being pulled downward. Some even began to rise back to safer altitudes. "They've developed countermeasures," Anna said, typing furiously on her console. "The scrubbers are creating localized bubbles of thinner atmosphere around their ships." James watched as more and more Draconian vessels escaped the pull of the disruptors. "Can we increase the power, pull them down faster?" Anna shook her head. "We're already at maximum. If we push the disruptors any harder, they'll burn out." The mood in the command center darkened as they watched their advantage slipping away. Nearly half the Draconian fleet had already returned to safe altitudes. "We need a new approach," James said, his mind racing. "If we can't bring them down." He paused, looking at data from weather satellites. "Maybe we need to go up." James called an emergency meeting with the core team. Maps and weather charts covered the tables as he explained his new idea. The atmospheric disruptors work by creating low-pressure zones that pull things downward, but they also create high-pressure zones elsewhere. What if we use those high-pressure zones to push something upward? Anna caught on immediately. "Like a cannon, we could use the pressure differentials to launch something into the upper atmosphere." "Exactly," James said. "But not just anything. We need to send up something that can damage their ships where they're most vulnerable." Colonel Reed leaned forward. "Conventional weapons won't work, their shields stop everything we've thrown at them." "We don't need conventional weapons," James replied. "We just need particles, millions of tiny particles, too small for their shields to detect and stop, but damaging in large numbers." He pointed to data from the captured Draconian ship. "Their whole material is vulnerable to certain earth elements, particularly iron oxide, rust. It reacts with their hull, causing microscopic fractures. One particle wouldn't do much, but millions. We could use the high-pressure zones to launch clouds of iron oxide particles into the upper atmosphere." Anna asked, surprised, "Yes. It reacts with their hull, causing microscopic fractures," James continued. "One particle wouldn't do much, but millions. We could use the high-pressure zones to launch clouds of iron oxide particles into the upper atmosphere. And not just that, electromagnetic pulse devices too. Their systems are vulnerable to EMPs, especially when their shields are focused on maintaining internal pressure." The plan quickly took shape. Around the world, teams modified the atmospheric disruptors to create powerful upward pressure zones. Tons of iron oxide powder were prepared, along with specially designed EMP devices that could survive the journey through the atmosphere. Meanwhile, the Draconians continued destroying any disruptors they could find, but there were too many, spread too widely for them to eliminate them all. Captain Drake watched with growing concern as his science officer reported strange readings from Earth's atmosphere. "The humans are changing the upper air currents," the officer explained, "creating unusual weather patterns." "How can this affect us?" Drake demanded. "Unknown, Captain, but they appear to be pushing something upward toward our fleet." Drake moved to the viewing screen, his vertical pupils narrowing as he studied the planet below. After a lifetime of military service, he had developed a sense for danger, and that sense was screaming. "Now, raise all ships by 5,000 feet, he ordered. "Whatever they're planning, we need more distance." But it was too late. "Launch!" James ordered. Around the world, the modified disruptors activated. Massive columns of high-pressure air shot upward, carrying with them clouds of rust-red particles and EMP devices like invisible fountains. They pushed their payload toward the Draconian fleet. In the command center, they watched tension meters rise as the particles reached the upper atmosphere. First contact in 3, 2, 1. Anna counted down. The effect wasn't visible from the ground, but sensors showed the results clearly. As the cloud of iron oxide particles engulfed the Draconian ships, the particles began to react with the alien hull material. Microscopic fractures spread across their surfaces, weakening their structural integrity. Then the EMPs activated. Ship after ship reported power fluctuations as the pulses disrupted their systems. The effects were especially severe for ships that had already been damaged by the pressure changes and the iron oxide particles. "It's working," Colonel Reed exclaimed, as the first Draconian vessel lost power completely and began to drift. But the main command ship, Captain Drake's vessel, remained operational. It was larger and better shielded than the others. "We need more," James said. "Focus all remaining disruptors on Drake's ship." Around the world, the remaining functional disruptors redirected their columns of high-pressure air, all targeting the area around the Draconian command vessel. Inside the command ship, systems began to fail. The rust particles had exploited tiny weaknesses in the hull, and the EMPs were disrupting their power grid. "Captain, we cannot maintain position," Drake's second-in-command reported. "Hull integrity is failing, and life support systems are at risk." Drake stared at the main view screen, watching as his mighty fleet began to fall apart around him. For the first time in his military career, he faced a choice between pride and survival. "Issue the retreat order," he finally said in a low voice. "All ships, to emergency escape vectors from the command center on Earth." James and his team watched in amazement as the Draconian fleet began to move, not down toward Earth, but up and away, fleeing the atmosphere entirely. "They're retreating," Anna said in disbelief. "Not retreating," James corrected. "Regrouping. This isn't over yet." The battle had been won, but the war continued, and Captain Drake would not forget this defeat easily. 3 days passed without any sign of the Draconian fleet. Some people began to celebrate, thinking Earth had won, leaders made victory speeches, citizens returned to their homes in cities that had been evacuated. But James Walker knew better. "They're not gone," he told President Wilson during an emergency meeting. "They're adapting, learning, planning their next move." "How can you be so sure?" the president asked. James pointed to the long-range scanner data. "There's movement in high orbit, they've positioned themselves just beyond our atmospheric reach, but they're still here." Colonel Reed nodded in agreement. "Our satellite images show they're repairing their ships, and they appear to be building something new." "What are they building?" the president asked. "We don't know exactly," Anna said, "but based on energy readings it could be some kind of atmospheric modification device. They might be planning to change our atmosphere to make it more like their home world." The president's face paled. "That would kill every human on Earth, which is why we need to strike first." James said firmly, "We need to take the fight to them before they can launch their next attack." "How can our weapons reach their current position?" James smiled slightly. "We're not going to use our weapons, we're going to use theirs." The plan was called Operation Skyward. While the Draconians had been recovering, James and his team had been busy studying the scout ship they had captured and the data from their atmospheric battles. The Draconians use gravity manipulation technology for their propulsion systems, Anna explained to the assembled military leaders. "We figured out how to reverse it. Instead of fighting Earth's gravity," James continued, "we're going to use it. We've modified the atmospheric disruptors to create controlled storm systems, massive updrafts that can carry specially designed payloads into the upper atmosphere and beyond. Factories worldwide have been working around the clock to produce the payloads, a combination of advanced EMP devices and nanites designed specifically to attack Draconian technology. The nanites are the key," Anna explained. "They're programmed to seek out and attach to the Draconian hull material. Once attached, they begin to break down the molecular structure like a metal-eating virus. Reed added, and the EMPs will disrupt their shields long enough for the nanites to get through. The president looked at each of them. When can we be ready? Tomorrow, James answered. The storm systems are already forming in the Draconian command ship. Captain Drake reviewed the final preparations for their counterattack. The atmospheric converter is ready, his science officer reported. Once deployed, it will begin transforming Earth's atmosphere to match our requirements. The process will take approximately 7 days, N. Drake, James interjected, they cannot survive in our atmosphere. They will suffocate within minutes once the conversion reaches their level. Drake nodded, his scaled face set in grim determination.